Good morning, everyone. I'm Josh Tarwater at Sonic Fan J on Twitter. Just Josh Tarwater in general for those who know me, or possibly even. Let's see here. Why Nimbus for those who got a really interesting bit of link on it to me, but I'll get things started here as soon as I let everybody know that I'm on mic at the chat. Hey, Molly Kitty, welcome to the chat. Glad you could make it. Not going to be too much going on at the first part of the stream because I don't chat too much while I'm writing, but feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'll be glad to answer them. Hopefully not get on too long of a tangent as I'm known to do. But as is typical with my streams, I'm alright for the most part. I think I covered most of it over on Twitter as I was going through replies to people. Been having little bits of stress here and there, some of it more overwhelming than others. Just kind of the way that it goes. Don't talk about certain things on stream, just because while I have as much privacy as I can get, it's not enough for me to talk about certain things. But we won't worry about me too much to start the stream. Still have the summary up here for those who haven't seen it already. And what I try to do with these little summaries, though I repeat it kind of in the story itself, is just set a tone for the scene itself. And as we can see, today's stream is going to be covering Chapter 4 of the Sonic Ring Bond story, and it's going to be the first chapter of the second episode. So we're moving on from episode of Afterfall, and now we're going into episode of New History. And the star of this chapter will be series protagonist Sonic the Hedgehog himself. We'll be starting the scene listening to... come on, if I can keep my head working properly. We'll be starting the scene listening to the theme of Sonic Ring Bond by Twitter user Shimshon the Gadite, which is why we actually have music playing while I'm talking. He specifically gave me permission when I asked for it to be able to play it in stream. They switch up to other music later in the stream. I will be muting the background music. So for now, enjoy this lovely piece of music. And I'll go ahead and get started. If I can keep all my windows and tabs going properly, I have quite a few of them. And for first-time viewers, like yourself, Molly Ketty, I have a little bit of... you probably are the only one here. I don't have a lot of followers, and most of them miss the streams. It's kind of a weird time in morning. Most people usually pop up around 90 minutes from now or so. Let's see here, though. Now, I actually have a bit of dialogue and work in here already. And it's literally lifted from the last work I was working on and the end of that story. Because that's literally the epilogue of that story was literally what I was imagining as the start of this story. So I went ahead and lifted that, and we'll be getting to that once I get the start going. So let's go ahead and get started. And as always, feel free to ask questions when I type, and mind that I don't say too much. Hopefully with a lot of pre-content in here, I can save a bit of time. Yep, writing is technically what I do, significantly more than drawing. I was just on a several month break after finishing up my last story since I was kind of planning on restarting the AU, and I wanted to give myself some time to relax, recover, and prepare for this. I'm actually still way behind in a lot of stuff I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to get a new Discord server going for the AU, kind of build a community on Discord for it, and help really get my readers involved. I don't know how many readers I have, but I'm hoping by posting to Twitter again and having a dedicated account that it'll start getting more people involved in the story. I'll also be posting to Tumblr and DeviantArt in addition to my usual platform of Tapas. I was hoping to do AO3 and Wattpad, but right now, it takes so long to get everything ready when I finish writing a scene that it's hard to imagine that I'll be able to have time to work on those. I know I typically try to hold on making grammatical corrections until I get to the second half of the stream, where I'll go through and proof the entire scene and talk about what my intentions were. More often than not, if I see a mistake I can correct immediately, I will kind of do so. But for the most part, I'll leave the mistakes in during this part of the stream. So if you want to see just how bad I can spell and my grammatical mistakes, this is a great part of the stream for that. Oh, that's very cool, but I unfortunately don't even have time to watch anime and stuff I used to watch regularly anymore. Between my job, personal responsibilities, and getting back into the AU, I just really haven't had a lot of time for anything. I actually have to force myself to draw, and if you've seen a lot of my latest art, it's all very, very simple, flat-colored, and very lacking in detail. That's literally a result of my absence of time. But still cool that they had some of your characters cameo. That's pretty awesome. Always a possibility. Always a possibility. Okay, so now I'm going to read through a bit of what I already have here. Again, not doing any corrections. For those who will be watching this in post, or on YouTube, or even on Twitch if you watch it that fast there, I actually just lost my train of thought. Go figure. Oh yeah, but I actually have a lot of stuff already slotted in here. As I said earlier at the stream, it's pretty much the epilogue of the last story I wrote before deciding I was going to restart my AU. And again, the reason for that is because this scene was written with restarting my AU already in mind. And so I'm actually able to use it and get things going. And it will help set the tone for how I'll be writing Sonic for most of the series. My primary inspiration for Sonic's personality is usually going to be the writing of Mai Kawashiro-san, who wrote Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic and the Black Knight, and Sonic 06. And while I'm not fond of his writing of Sonic in 06, much more a fan of his Shadow episode there, he does help really bring out certain aspects of Sonic's character. If I also have a complaint about his, is that his Sonic's too nice, and hence why the OVA becomes a bit more influential on my perception of things. And it's not that Sonic is mean. Sonic is extremely kind, actually, but the way he presents himself is abrasive. He's described as irreverent yet charming, or to sum it up in a word, cheeky. It's why he has a mouth on him, why he makes the quips that he does. This is a representation of that. And Sonic's an interesting character to write for. A lot of people look at him and see his age listed as 15. And they go, okay, Sonic's 15, so he must be like your typical teenager. And you'll see a lot of fan interpretations really drive home the heavy teenage mentality, which will then turn around and confuse people with having his current English voice actor for the last 10 years be Roger Craig Smith, who was hired and instructed for the sole purpose of Sonic sounding older. And a lot of people will complain that his Sonic sounds like he's in his 30s. And that's understandable. It's a very much older take on Sonic than a lot of people would expect. My personal opinion on how he should be voiced is voiced as if he's an older character, but with a youthfulness an older character wouldn't normally have. I don't know if Roger Craig Smith can do it, but between the currently active voice actors for Sonic in the US, Roger Craig Smith, and Ben Schwartz over on the movie side, Roger Craig Smith makes him sound like a disillusioned 30-year-old man who cracks wise because it's the only way he can cope with his disillusionment with the world. Works really great for Sonic Boom, not so much for the carefree, follow-the-wind adventurer of the games. Which is probably part of the reason why a lot of their writing leaned into more of a stand-up comic approach on Sonic, rather than the wisecracking adventurer he is. On the flip side, Ben Schwartz, as he's playing literally a kid version of Sonic, his presentation is significantly childish and childlike. And so again, the idea of an older character who sounds youthful being the type of voice that would fit Sonic isn't really captured. But to give people an idea of that being a good way to go about it is Kanemoto Junichi-san, Sonic's Japanese VA. He is, I believe, 53 now, actually. And he still voices Sonic the same as he has for the last, let's see here, 23 years now? And so, it's a bit of a difference in presentation. And then another example of that, if you're familiar with the Dragon Ball franchise, the character Trunks, who ended up being the inspiration for Silver, the Hedgehog, throughout the series you have his teenage young adult self, and you also have his child self, which a lot of Trunks fans are finally cheering, as Dragon Ball Super is moving past from. But his voice actor, who also has voiced Sonic, even before Kanemoto's Junichi song, I just can't remember his name right now. If you're familiar with a lot of the Sega arcade games, he was actually Sonic's voice for those. So the Sega Sonic Patrol Car, the Sega Sonic Space Fighter, the Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, where Mighty and Ray debuted, all the voice lines for Sonic in those particular games were provided by him. But he's older than Kanemoto Junichi-san, and he still provides the voice for Trunks as a kid. So again, the idea of an older character who sounds youthful, to me, is the best way to approach Sonic's voice. And part of the reason for this, and it's not something a lot of people know, you gotta kind of dig around through some old Japanese manga and get some translations on them if you don't know Japanese, is Sonic as a character one of the early concepts for him, and it's a shame I can't find the articles on this. It was actually explained by Oshima Naoto-san and Yasuharu-san? I never trust myself with his name, and my pronunciation of Japanese names is in need of a lot of practice. But they had, I believe it was in Germany, they were hosting a video game design class, and they were talking a lot about early Sonic works, and a lot of stuff came out of that, a lot of artwork, a lot of concepts on Sonic 2, and one of the things that came out about it, and you'll see it in my work a lot, is I always read Sonic not as a modern setting like a lot of people do, but more as a Age of Adventure setting. If you're not familiar with the Age of Adventure, to get a good idea for how I see it, I recommend watching Studio Ghibli's Porco Rosso. But if you're not fond of anime, I would recommend Indiana Jones, The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser, films like that which are specifically set between the two world wars. That particular era, especially around the Mediterranean, a lot of archaeological interest in ancient Egypt, and a lot of people from the war owning personal planes and just literally making life as adventuring, pretty much, traveling as airplane package carriers, all sorts of interesting stuff like that. It's a very romanticized era. Porco Rosso, my film of preference, is actually set towards the end of the Age of Adventure as World War II is starting up and pilots are being recruited across Italy. But Sonic himself is actually inspired by, according to some of this material, and they did admit that that was the age era that they were inspired by, but they specifically focus more on post-World War II, even though most of the work is more pre-World War II. And the proof that that was the era they were thinking of is the Sonic the Hedgehog title screen. A lot of you, if you haven't played the original, have probably seen it in artwork or from Sonic Generations, but that star emblazoned ring with the wings on it, that is actually common imagery off of the back of bomber jackets, which is the type of jackets that World War II dogfighters wore. And to this day, fighter pilots still wear those type of jackets. And that is literally where that image comes from, as it was taken from that. And so, one of the original ideas for Sonic, before they ended up where they did, is that he would be a children's storybook character, and a mother was, well, not a mother, but the wife of a deceased pilot who had the jacket would be telling his story. And there's a bunch of different ways that it goes. And the idea is that he was based off of a World War II fighter pilot and who was nicknamed Hedgehog because of his spiky hair. And said pilot had a huge pursuit of the idea of speed. That's a really interesting little story to read. There is a manga that covers it. If you've ever heard of the Sonic Bodyguard Squad, or whatever they're called, a strange little group of female characters, anime-style characters, it's actually from that full comic where the story's at the end of explaining it. And the pilot in question, who the fictional pilot would have been based off of, was actually the first person to break the speed of sound. A lot of people attribute that to Chuck Yeager, who is also a huge influence in who Sonic is as a character. And again, we're talking about a World War II fighter pilot. And for those not familiar with it, military recruitment begins at 16 today in the US. In World War II, it was even younger than that. And so you did not have 30-year-olds fighting in World War II. You had 15 to 20-year-olds in those trenches, flying those planes, driving the tanks. It was, we would call them kids today. And to think that it's only been around 80 years now, and not even a century ago, we sent kids to war. And it just stuns people to think about it. But a lot of that also comes from the time era required a much greater maturity in children than we're used to today. And so, as a result, I mean, to really throw people for a loop, up until modern medicine really started teaching us how human physiology worked, most of the world perceived adulthood at the onset of puberty. The moment that you were capable of reproduction, you were an adult. You just had to prove it now. And that's why you get so many stories from other cultures of coming-of-age stories. And coming-of-age usually puts these kids in very adult situations, because historically, that's what it was. Modern medicine really changed the world and infantilized 15-year-olds and up. Because again, in a lot of the world, before modern medicine, 15 was the age of an adult. And it's really confusing to people today because it's a very abstract and foreign concept. So, back on Chuck Yeager, he might have been in his 40s during the supersonic sound test. He was actually the second human being to exceed the sound barrier. The reason he gets the credit for it, though, and not the other pilot, is why they were partners in these tests. And to my knowledge, they flew together as part of the same fighter pilot wing in World War II. Chuck Yeager flew and landed his plane. The other pilot, the fictional pilot, the Hedgehog, who Sonic would be based off of, unfortunately, his plane tore apart and exploded during the flight run. He broke the sound barrier, and his plane exploded afterwards. It's more like than not that the sonic boom destroyed the vehicle. And it's very sad to think about. The story itself actually, that talks about it and shows how this would have been an inspiration for Sonic, actually has Sonic literally appear on the world at that time era. And as a result, he just literally kind of appears in the world as almost a supernatural being, protecting somebody from the crash of the plane parts. And then his appearance is no longer on the jacket, because his appearance is actually on the jacket. It was, a very superstitious thing that the jacket protected people and so on. It's a very interesting story. The point of it is, though, is these tests were done in the 60s, I believe. The war had ended 20 years before that. And so you have these men at their 30s to mid-40s, and that's where Sonic is based off of, World War II fighter pilots. And again, that's following up the Age of Adventure and that biplane era that existed before World War II. And so Sonic, presented as significantly older than his age is listed, is because of the type of ideas that went into his creation. So if someone thinks that Sonic acts far too old and far too mature for a 15-year-old, it's because they're demonstrating that they don't know the full background on what was going into Sonic's creation. And so this maturity, and it's still a thing which happens today. A lot of people are totally oblivious to it, but if you go to Africa, especially countries where people get recorded into the armies of the various warlords in some parts, you literally have prepubescent children carrying fully automatic weapons, know how to use them, and have killed more people than even the average gun-toting criminal in the US will ever kill in their lifetime. And these kids haven't even reached puberty yet. And so maturity typically comes from experience, not age. And that's something a lot of the Western world is strangely ignorant on in modern times. We work so hard to protect people so they develop in a way that fits our societal standards that we have a tendency of completely blocking out reality itself. It's really, really weird for the most part. And so that's where I come to when I approach Sonic. Yes, he's 15, but he's also very experienced. We know from Nakayuji-san's words that on Christmas Island, in his version of Earth, it was full of strange creatures, monsters, and robots. And he survived there. And one day he got sick and tired of living there and wanted to see the larger world, grabbed his plane and flew away. Which is another thing people forget about Sonic. The Tornado is literally his plane. And before he met Tails in Sonic 2, he piloted it himself. In fact, the Japanese manual of Sonic 2, which has like one of 3 different ways of presenting how Sonic and Tails meet, it actually I think has 2 different versions of it in the same manual. But Sonic lands on Westside Island, recognizing it as a legendary island. While flying the Tornado himself, he literally decides to stop there not to have an adventure, but to take a break between adventures. The encounter with Eggman, which was a very typical thing outside of Sonic 1, Sonic CD, Sonic 2, and Sonic 3, his encounters with Eggman were all coincidental. He, unlike how a lot of the West perceives him, he does not actively hunt Eggman the majority of the time. He is usually doing his own thing, and events happen to have him and Eggman meet up. It's usually a pure coincidence, but then because Eggman's causing trouble, Sonic, with his very distinct sense of justice and sense of right and wrong, steps in to save the day. Now, a lot of people would say that he's also too lenient on Eggman, but it really depends on the situation. At the end of Sonic 1, the player can actually choose to attack Eggman, implying that Sonic takes the action to kill him. In Sonic 2, he does not try to save Eggman when he flees from the explosion of the Death Egg. In Sonic and Knuckles, he literally destroys the mech that Eggman is piloting into the vacuum of space and does nothing to rescue him. And so, it's not that Sonic hasn't left Eggman to die on more than enough occasions, it's that Eggman's just really good at surviving. And as you'll see in my AU when I describe a lot of the uses of the rings and how they work, I will pretty much argue that the reason Eggman survives is because of the rings. And a lot of people would go, well yeah, but rings, you already said not everybody in your AU can even use rings. In fact, it's even in this opening part, which I will get to again during the proofing section. After the proofing section on this stream, I'm kind of talking a bit and have to end this stream early today because of other errands I have to get done, which is why it's a bonus to have a lot of pre-written content already. But proof that Eggman can't interact with the rings comes in 2 forms. There is the delisted Knuckles Chaotix game, known in Japan simply as Chaotix, where literally Eggman has begun study of the rings, and is studying the rings themselves, learning about the Chaos Rings, which are rings transformed by the Master Emerald, and trying to create his own version of rings in Dark Rings. Also, he can understand, control, and use even the rings themselves against Sonic. And so that's one point of proof. The other point of proof that Eggman can indeed interact with rings is Eggman is a playable character in 2 Sonic games. Sonic Advance 3, during the Supersonic battle, and, more importantly, in a game more people are likely to know, Sonic Adventure 2. As a playable character, Dr. Eggman uses rings. And because of the way that the mech stages work, if I recall correctly, Tails and Eggman's mechs should have hit points, and collecting rings restores them. Which is kind of like the Werehog's health meter, and one of the ways that you'll see me use rings throughout the AU is that they can literally be put into things to repair them. And so, Eggman can use rings. And so it's not that he shouldn't have died, but as the prologue covered, when faced with certain doom, or irreversible harm, the rings will whisk you away to somewhere safe. Which is how I will address checkpoints in the games. Instead of using the classic star post, I will actually be swapping them out with a special type of ring. For the most part, I enjoy making a lot of use of rings. Again, as I'll have new viewers both here and during the stream and watching later, as I get back into the story here, so I can actually get around to finishing it up, you'll notice that I leave little notes throughout, which do 2 things for me. The first thing they do is just a quick way for me to keep track of what music I was listening to during certain parts. So when I go back to proof and format for posting on social media and other sites, I'll be able to know what I was listening to, so I can put myself back in the same mindset. But also, I am building kind of a very loose game design document that will be eventually posted on a eventually coming Discord server. And so you'll see these little GDN notes that I put to the side. I need to actually go back and count my cutscenes, which is why the number's not listed here. But it will give additional information on what my thoughts are on what's going on in the story and so on. We're really hoping to get a community built around the AU and interacting with it. I actually have 2 distinct ultimate goals with the AU, both of which will eventually take it out of my hands. Is either it becomes so popular that Sega themselves adapt it, and thus Sega is in total control of it, and I can take my hands off of it and let it thrive, or I build a community around it, and the community becomes so involved and so large that it becomes a thing of the community, and I no longer have to contribute to it, and I can just watch it grow and enjoy it from afar. But until then, I hope to really establish firm groundwork for how it works. And the 3 core aspects of the AU is Amy, as if she was developed with Sonic's moveset or her own variation on it instead of having the Pico Pico Hammer. The Son Amy ship, and lastly, just the idea of exploring the rings and making them a legitimate part of the entire IP and not just a mechanic in the games. And to justify why Sonic collects them while running around, why other characters collect them while running around, constantly making them a part of the story. It's one of the reasons why my AU villain we won't be seeing for a while, is actually the God of Rings. Is because it constantly keeps rings tied into the story and a continuous and major element of everything going on. But that was quite a bit of talking on my end. So I'm going to go ahead and reread over what I got so I put myself back where I need to be mentally. As always, though, feel free to ask any questions and I'll be glad to answer them, but I'll be trying to avoid going on too long of a tangent. Alright, and with that, I can go ahead and wrap up the first scene of episode of New History. And it also means it's going to be time to go ahead and take a break. As always, the writing bit is usually pretty quiet, a little bit chatty at the start this time. But the proofing part of the stream will be coming after my break, usually about 15 to 30 minutes. And I'll go over a bit of what I was talking about in the first part. And a little more of what was going on at the rest of the scene. Hopefully everyone enjoys, and we'll be looking forward to what's next. Looking forward to answering your questions, and feel free to drop some off while we're on break. I'll be back in a bit. See you then, everyone. And we're back. Thank you everyone for your patience. A bit of a shorter break today. I'm your host, Joshua Tarwater, also known as Sonic Fan J, and we are returning to writing Chapter 4 and the first episode of New History for my Sonic the Hedgehog AU story. Talked a bit during the first part of the stream, which is unusual for the writing part. Had a bit of time because this scene actually has a good chunk of reused writing, which I purposely left in check and how it was from a prior story. But we'll go ahead and get into it. Let's have a bit of fun with it too, I hope. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and leave them in the chat as I work. And I do a lot of my dialogue during these, talking with the belief that people already know who Sonic the Hedgehog is at least a surface level glance of him. My understanding and perception of his character, as well as others in the universe, is very different. And hopefully that will prove entertaining in my AU story. For those curious about the music that we're listening to, we are listening to the theme of Sonic Ring Bond, which I commissioned from the rather amazing Shimshon the Godite on Twitter. He hasn't officially posted it yet to Twitter. Well, he has posted it to Twitter, and I really should track down the link for it. I think I'll go ahead and do that, honestly. But if you want to listen on your own time, well, that's hard to say too. I have it at this playlist I just linked, but chances are you won't be able to listen to it. So let me go ahead and track it down real quick. So that way I can link everybody to the tweet. So that way you can go ahead and go give it a well-deserved listen. He's a great artist and definitely worth following. There we go. There's the link to the tweet when he posted it, so more than worth stopping by and enjoying. For now, we'll go ahead and jump right into the proofing. Hopefully I can cover a bit of it. I want to try to keep it short today, so I'll go ahead and reread my own work, check for things that need proofed, and talk about what my intentions were. So these opening paragraphs before the zone title was given, I'm mostly just going to be talking about the general idea. I like to kind of do a little introduction before the scene starts to help set the mood. It's one of those things I enjoy to do. And so in this case I was talking about dreams and the dreams of the rings. And there's a lot of stuff I'm hinting at here. It's more so foreshadowing if my make it up as I go writing lets me get away with it. But really I just take this moment to explain how the world works and why. And then explaining how it creates trouble and even adventure for Sonic on a whole. But again, this part of the stream is mostly going to be based in some foreshadowing, by just helping set the mood of pondering over reality itself, so to say. And right here, again, as a concept I bring up a lot of my streams, is that not everybody can interact with the rings, at least in the state of them as rings. You can't even see them, and part of the reason I came up with that idea is it's kind of my own way of addressing, well, how come other Sonic media doesn't show rings all that often? How come they have these abilities or those abilities? And again, these are just things that I will play around with in time. As things progress, I'll probably even play around with the idea of why video monitors work to a degree, though I'll probably switch them up. And yes, even elemental shields, and so on. I will make use of them throughout the story, and over time. Just not necessarily very often, but please feel free to ask me my thoughts and ideas on them. I'm always happy to explain. And mind me for getting distracted by the things at the top of the screen. I use Microsoft Word, but I use it at such a surface level, I don't have the majority of problems that other people do. And one of the fun things that I like to do, try to make the stream a little more visually interesting. Don't know if you've noticed, but my title blocks, I'm able to do it on stream, and if you read the story on Tumblr or DeviantArt in the future, you'll see it there. Unfortunately, you can't do it on Topis, but you'll see that it's animated, the gearing here. Pardon me. A little bit of voice trouble there. And so as you can see, get into now past this. The next page and couple of paragraphs into the next one is content that I wrote when I wrapped up the prior story. This was technically the epilogue of that story, and I wrote it full well in context, knowing that I was going to be restarting how I did my AU. While I'll be carrying a lot of concepts forward from there in time, most notably my villain, Emperor Benedict Yodaku. Emperor of Nothing, still God of Rings. I wrote this part of what's now this scene fully in that knowledge and fully for use over here. And a lot of what I do with it is just taking the scene, huge tribute to the beginning of the Sonic OVA. But I also go ahead and work with using it to build off of how I see Sonic and Tails' relationship this early in it, because we are set just after the first fall of the Death Egg. And as such, Sonic and Tails have only known each other for one adventure, and Tails is mostly just following and keeping up. And so I write him with a nervousness and a unease around Sonic. This is his idol, but his idol also keeps his distance. And so though Tails has fought beside him, he also couldn't keep up to the end of the adventure. And so there's kind of that loss of confidence in him not being good enough. And so the idea of the brotherly bond that a lot of people are going to be used to is going to be absent. It won't be absent from Sonic's side, because as we'll see as the scene progresses, Sonic's memories are still intact. And I'll specifically get to that and why. And so, right here on the left side of the page, I start with what I typically do to set a scene, is I will do a series of quick short sentences which just gives very basic descriptions, and it jumps from one to the other. The idea is to put quick images in the reader's mind and let their imagination paint out the scene. It's based off the way that, well, it's inspired by the way that the director of Revolutionary Guard Utena, or Mawaru Penguin Drum, Yurikuma Arashi, I can't remember the name of his Kappa one, but I can't remember his name accurately either. But let's see if I can bring it up real quick. Kunihiko Ikuhara song, or if I'm going to do it properly by using song, Ikuhara Kunihiko song. Though in my case, as I've learned from his work, I will address him as Ikuhara Sensei. And the way he directs a scene, I really need to memorize his name. So horrible of me. But the way he directs a scene, and the way he will jump from the characters to show the environment, and it provides a contrast to what the characters are talking about. It makes the environment part of the storytelling, and shows a lot of the conflict that the characters are embroiled with. I would say my presentation of it is fairly, well, how I present, though inspired by it, is its own beast, but I'm nowhere near at the point in my storytelling ability in my own eyes to be able to compare myself at all to Ikuhara Sensei. In time, I would love to get there, but for now, I'll work with what I can and allow myself to grow at my own pace. Hopefully feedback from my readers and viewers will help me get there faster than I'm planning, but at the end of the day, I just hope my inspiration and my work inspired by it will continue to entertain. And so as we move forward, let me just go ahead and read through this now. And so this right here is the first time that Amy's name is said in the entire AU story. I had plenty of chances at the last scene, and I purposely made sure it wasn't said. The idea of disconnecting what will be Rosie from the Amy that most people know is a necessity for how I'll be telling the story. As for why I have Sonic call her Amy, it's actually a bit more subtle, a bit more maybe silly and frivolous, but aside from being an AU to explore the idea of what if Amy had Sonic's moveset, what more can I do with the rings, as I said as well, this is a Son-Amy based AU, and Amy is a derivative of the French name Amelia, which has the meaning of beloved. And so to say that Sonic wakes from a dream and the first thing he says is pretty much beloved, in French no less, which is known as the language of love, the language of romance, I'm literally being a bit heavy-handed, but pretty much saying it straight up, he loves Amy. He will never admit to it. Which will be covered in these next 3 paragraphs, which will start with Tails talking and teasing Sonic. And for talking about that nervousness that I'm writing into his character, teasing is an ideal way of breaking the ice, because as someone defends themselves from the teasing, how they defend themselves, their body language, their tone, and their reaction will tell you how comfortable they are with you, and if it's okay to continue that way or not. Plus, Tails is supposed to idolize Sonic. We all know him as a good boy. He's the kind one. A snarky Tails, more often than not, doesn't read well. However, his attempts to imitate Sonic's cheeky attitude should come across as endearing. And the OVA is probably my favorite outing for Tails, and while he's as much of an exposition dumper there as he is in recent games, there is a childishness around him, and the way a kid will try to imitate their idol, and a lot of the times he always gets it wrong. But it's still generally, he's meant to be a fun character, and not just an exposition dumper. But a lot of that fun from his character is usually seen around Sonic and comes out around Sonic. In a way, Sonic is both a good influence on him and a bad influence. And I have nothing against showing Sonic as a bad influence, because there are things and ways that Sonic lives his life which do not work in a societal sense. And the only reason he's able to get away with it is because both the time era setting he lives in, which I talked about during the first part of the stream, is very much influenced by the Age of Adventure. A lot of stuff that happened there. If you've seen The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser, if you're familiar with the Indiana Jones franchise, it's roughly an era of life set after the First World War, before the Second, and a little spillover past the Second. And you have adventurers and bounty hunters and mercenaries. The movie Porco Rosso by Studio Ghibli is a good place to start if you want to see the influence of that age on my works, though I will reach beyond just that particular theming of just the Age of Adventure, and I'll mix in a bit of that steampunk imagery from other Ghibli films such as Castle in the Sky Laputa and Howl's Moving Castle. Bring a bit of that rich fantasy into Sonic's rather abstract and fantastical version of Earth, which I will talk about in detail at other times. But yes, I do not use the term Mobius or Sonic's world, or even adhere to the idea of two worlds. Specifically, I follow the idea of a single world with layered upon dimensions. And through the rings, one can access these different layers, and the rings themselves, as they merge with the world, as they lose energy, and then take on their loop forms and leave the world, will also pull and push the contents of the dimensions around, keeping the world in constant flux and allowing for the limitless adventures that Sonic has. As I've said, I'm very big on the idea of making the rings an integral part of the world, which is more than just a gameplay mechanic, but affects every aspect of a character's lives. And so, this is Earth, where these adventures take place. And so I'll go ahead and just now read through the highlighted area to catch any of my mistakes, though in this case, up to a certain point, I won't be doing any corrections because I want this to still match what I posted last year. And you'll also see me throw out for the first time Rascal in reference to Amy. Her original nickname when she debuted was Rosie the Rascal, and if you're familiar with the Japanese manual for Sonic CD, it's actually the first thing presented to us about her, is she's just listed as Rosie the Rascal. It's after that that her real name is mentioned as Amy Rose. And so that's one of the things that I'll be approaching, is the idea that we should look at her as Rosie the Rascal first. Only Sonic, I went looking at her as Amy, or Beloved. And so, for everyone else, I want to lock in the idea of the Rascal. And not the strange, unhinged, very out of control, unstable demon known as Anti-Amy from the Archie comics, but the sweet, rosy personality troublemaker who just wants to have a bit of fun and help the people that she meets have fun. And it's very important to me to make that distinction. But since she doesn't really make too much of an appearance in this scene, we'll just leave it at that, and that I'm purposely inserting the idea of her being a rascal, and the name Rosie the Rascal, as how other characters will refer and respond to her. And again, as I said, the OVA is a lot of my primary inspiration, so there will be a lot of smug and irritable Sonic. And you'll see that a lot out of him, and it's one of the things I want to play with, that balance of his smugness, but how much he cares, and the playfulness that he possesses. And playfulness to me is very important in the Sonic franchise. It was very prevalent early on. It's probably one of the reasons why I can enjoy the 2 episodes of Sonic 4, technically 3 if you count episode Metal, is because there's a natural playfulness in the presentation of that game. Probably one of my favorite examples with people playing with it is Sonic's looking up animation in Sonic 4. Is somebody was taking on the Death Egg rowboat at the end of episode 1, and when it goes to jump, they have Sonic go into his looking up animation. And the way it plays out is absolutely brilliant, because it's that playful mocking of Eggman that Sonic does. And to me, that's endearing. But again, the OVA is also a big inspiration, so the idea of Sonic being easily irritable, which according to Nakayuji-san, if Sonic does not get 8 hours of sleep, he will be irritable. And so, irritable and not able to enjoy his running. And so you'll see that throughout the story, the idea of how much sleep Sonic gets in relation to his mood. And I'll make sure I play with that throughout, since it's a core part of Sonic's character. And as we move on, I introduce the idea of Tails' confusion at the very mention of Amy. Why, the very next game after Sonic 2 and Sonic CD is Sonic Drift, and the two are implied in the Japanese manuals to already be good friends, both by the absence of use of honorifics between them, and also just the general, well, how amicable they are to each other, which is natural in Amy's case as it is, because she's a very friendly person. One of the reasons I'm not fond of the temper that Sonic X introduced into her is a lot of her natural friendliness is pushed aside for gags that are born out of a very nasty and unpleasant temper, which goes against her character as both a Genki girl, which is where a lot of her perpetual good cheer energy come from, but it also goes against one of her core roles as a mood maker. And if you're not familiar with the term, the role of the mood maker in a narrative is to keep everybody else in good spirits. As a result, to play with that role throughout the series, I am going to have to constantly put her and the characters around her, the stories I tell, in bad spots. So that way her positivity can constantly come through. It won't always be a good thing, because sometimes trying to be positive when things don't require it can be aggravating to people. Sometimes people need that cynicism that others present because it's more sympathetic than cheering someone up and telling them it's okay to keep pushing forward. Sometimes you just need that moment to dwell, and so to have that shared cynicism is more sympathetic than the good cheer. For as much as people want her more realistic, by rounding her away from her good cheer and endless energy, it actually kills a lot of potential and interesting dynamics and interactions with other characters. I mean, arguably, she hasn't interacted with anyone outside of Sonic, Big, and Cream since... what? Sonic 06? No, Sonic Unleashed. She talked to Professor Pickle. And she's implied to talk to Chip throughout the game, but there's literally no point in the game that she actually talks to him. And so if you consider that she hasn't talked to anybody really but Sonic since then, it's a little surprised a lot of people have really forgotten who she is. No less been able to see that a lot of opportunity is lost with her character. She's gotten a lot better over in the IDW comics, but she's still a far cry from who she was before the introduction of that temper. Which again, a little surprised, the most recent person to write her was Evan Stanley, and Evan Stanley's a big fan of Sonic X, Sonic Battle, and Amy's temper in general. And so that's going to come across into writing, and it will push her away from it. Where conversely, I prefer the more friendly and ridiculous, over-energetic, goes way further than she needs to for any given task, Amy that you see in Sonic Adventure and also Sonic Mania Adventures Episode 6. And that is where I will personally be writing from. Aside from that, there is the general idea that who Amy was can't work. Considering how much she's beloved when she's written that way by Tyson Hess, such as in Sonic Mania Adventures Episode 6, I will argue that she can be written that way and be very successful. But the other reason that you don't get people writing her accurately is the primary people who have been writing her of late are Japanese writers in games where she's not important, so her role is more important than she is, and so the role is written before her character, which is how you get mature Amy for Forces. Or you have Ian Flynn also writing her, who literally boils Amy down to the kind one, and says he prefers her as the crazy fangirl because it's funnier. And you'll only really see the crazy fangirl interpretation in fanworks, and a bit of Archie in a few places. Considering was a huge Archie comic fan before he became a writer for the Archie comics, it's little surprise that's what he thinks of when he thinks Amy, and finds her boring when she's written more legitimately. Again, if you round her out too much, I do agree with Ian Flynn that if she's rounded out without using her traits to round her out, which happens a lot. I wrote a 11,000 word essay on what I think about when I write her. it would be better for me to link everyone to that than to let it take up all the stream, especially since, again, I'm working with a bit of a time limit today. So, let me go ahead and break off of that and get back into the scene at hand. So again, irritability is a core trait in Sonic I want to make sure I keep around. He is supposed to have a temper himself, and when legitimately angered, he's supposed to have a very surprising personality change to one that's very cold, very serious. And you don't really see it that often in the games, or really any media. It's more so of an informed trait by Nakayuji-san. But it's one I hope to be able to make use of from time to time with the story. For now, though, I'm just focusing on his irritability. And now this here's the last paragraph from the prior work. And I purposely avoid talking about any of the nervousness or unease Tails could be experiencing here, as Sonic directs that irritability at him, before they've really bonded to that unbreakable bond that people know. Because I wanted to focus on the fact that Sonic is having to accept that no one knows who Amy is. She's just gone. Yet he remembers her. It's kind of also, and how this story is going, a way to transition Sonic to the time era that he's in. And so as we move into a new work now, again, I'm playing with that irritability, but also making Sonic sit back and think about the scene he's looking at. And though Sonic Generations implies otherwise, with him neither recognizing Green Hill or Chemical Plant Zone, typically, in a lot of the Japanese side of things, and side media, Sonic is implied to have such a good memory that he pretty much never forgets anything. This is seen in aspects of the games, and is hinted at here and there, such as at the end of Sonic 06, and I purposely reference it later in the story, that even with a full reset of time, Sonic holds on to memories. Now, whether that's an effect of using the Time Stones to stop Eggman at the end of Sonic CD, or just throughout Sonic CD in general, or if it's just another one of those things that makes Sonic special and his ability to reject and resist even reality itself. It's hard to say, but this nigh-flawless memory of his is kind of a character trait, which has persisted for a while, and one that I will personally play with. And if one were to argue that future content could change that, which it very well could, where my story picks up with Sonic is back at a time period where it was easy to believe his memory was that good. Which is a funny thing for him to have such a good memory when he's not known for looking back. And so, with this scene, again, not just the irritability and taking in the scene, but also starting to switch the idea to him having to perceive it as a dream when talking to other people. It's also a bit of fun that there are things that he knows which can almost be seen as prophetic dreams, with again me tying him heavily to the Son Amy ship in my AU, since fortune telling is one of Amy's hobbies. So to a degree, with Amy being a Sonic clone, it shouldn't be too surprising that certain aspects of her character would pop up in writing around Sonic's character from me. I just have to be careful to make sure I keep the focus between them where it needs to be. And now I give Sonic that moment that he needs to put his thoughts together and take it all in. And with this next paragraph, I'm now just pretty much setting up and writing the scene to reflect the Sonic 3 Japanese manual story, to where the whole reason Sonic goes to Angel Island is, again, he's not hunting Eggman. Literally, an ancient ring washes up on the beach where he's chilling after Sonic 2's adventure, and he picks it up, and the ancient writing on it reminds him of the legends of Angel Island, and so he decides to go check it out. That's literally why he ends up on Angel Island. Of the original games, the only one that would be considered canon, where he actually goes directly after Eggman from the get-go, is the original. And that's because he's literally asked for help. So kind of a bit of fun there. And also during these scenes, you'll see a bit of Tails being curious, inquisitive. I play with the idea that Tails is a tinkerer. Somewhere along the line, he went from a tinkerer to a full-on inventor. And personally speaking, I've always found it to be a little weird. To a lot of people, it's a natural evolution that you go from tinkering to invention, because you take what you've learned from all your tinkering and apply it to new ideas. But I feel it's a transition that happened too quickly, and it simultaneously makes Tails overpowered or totally incompetent. And a lot of people argue, well, it plays into him being a kid. And it's like, yes and no. When you're writing him as smarter than Eggman as an inventor, you've made him way too smart. Especially when you turn around and have none of his own inventions work properly. That is not being a kid. And it's one of the reasons that I think he's endeared to a lot of people in Sonic Boom, is he's not smarter than Eggman. Eggman makes a fool of him regularly. His own inventions are vastly inferior to Eggman's, and so them messing up compared to when he tinkers on already finished work is a lot more believable and plays into the idea of him being a kid. And as a result, I will probably lean away from the idea of him inventing things. But if I do have him invent, much as I personally didn't like the Sonic Boom sub-universe, despite the fact that a lot of the concepts for Sonic Synergy I think could have been executed brilliantly, Tails is a point of taking inspiration from. And since in time you'll also see my own take on Zoe from Sonic Boom in my AU, you'll know that there are things in the show that I enjoyed, even if on a whole the Sonic Boom sub-branch didn't do it for me. Just the fact that we're here looking at an ancient ring should already tell you, though, that the Sonic 2 setting, Sonic and Knuckles, focus on Amy and the Sonic CD time period, it's obvious that before anything else I am a classic fan. Though I would argue what the classic period is, a lot of diehards are going to tell you pre-adventure, which truly is its own era. But I will personally argue, just from the way the storytelling was, and knowing the Japanese side of storytelling, that the classic era would probably be best defined as Sonic 1 all the way through Sonic Heroes. No, it's not even Sonic Heroes. All the way through Shadow 05, and potentially even into Sonic 06. And the reason into Sonic 06 is because Shadow's story is still continuing at that point, including his relationship with GUN. And while GUN is still mentioned come Unleashed, when we get to Unleashed, literally everything that came before is barely there. There's no longer that sense of carrying any lore or stories forward. In fact, the lore is pretty much entirely rewritten. The Chaos Emeralds are now powered by the life energy of the planet, and also help Light Gaia hold it together against the negative energy of Dark Gaia, which breaks it apart and ends the life on the planet. And while that still ties into a degree to some of the original ideas that are presented in translations of the Japanese manual for the original game, and you'll see it in my story of describing as the Chaos Emeralds as crystallized representations of all the life on Earth, it has been massively changed at that point. And it's not necessarily easy to see. And then it's even removed even more so, though, come Sonic Colors. And the absence of the Chaos Emeralds in general over the next few games almost makes their unexpected introduction into comics kind of a, we know you haven't been happy with the games, so here's all the old elements that used to be here on a regular basis, even if the IP has moved away from them. And now with the Master Emerald and possibly even the Chaos Emeralds being introduced into the next Sonic movie, it's very likely going forward that we'll be seeing a return of old elements, the Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles trio, which there are a lot of people who are annoyed by it. And it's not really a surprise, because aside from the three of them together in imagery, it actually only happens once where the three are all on the same side from the get-go, and that's in the OVA. You don't see it happen again until Sonic Heroes. And so, to blame Genesis nostalgia for it is not necessarily accurate, but it's a thing that Amy fans do. And it's one of the reasons actually why I believe in writing Rosie differently from Amy and focusing on different aspects of her character and the roles that she brings. Because as she is written as a combat strength character with great archaeological knowledge from Boom, no less a sound and level-headed leader, she gets to the point that she can pretty much replace the entire team. And that starts to become a Mary Sue, which is not something Amy should ever lead in the direction of. Breaking back to the story where I'm at, since we haven't gotten to her yet. Again, I take a moment to emphasize that the story takes place on Earth, a distinct Sonic version of Earth, but Earth, and a bit more mention of how the rings work. And as Tails talks about translating the writing and what can be learned, that idea of him being somebody who tinkers, somebody who enjoys learning, that scholarly aspect of his character, I use that to transition into Sonic commenting that he knows, that he bets he knows somebody who can read it long as it's not a dream. That little thing is literally just a reference to the fact of Knuckles existing. And because it's resulting in Sonic talking weird again, I now switch to showing Sonic despite what's going on. He's now established the point of time he's at, and he's able to play back into it. And we'll get that in this paragraph here. And now you'll see me start introducing the changes into history. the loss of the Chaos Emeralds. Sonic had them all, and he used them to survive re-entry, but now they're gone. This is our first big change in history from where the games went. And now it's implying that without them, Tails can't even make his radar, which is part of how they're able to find Angel Island in the first place. And so this starts showing Tails is getting nervous. He's appearing useless now before Sonic after everything he's been working hard on to keep up. And this is playing back into the fact that they barely know each other yet. If one considers over the course of the Sonic 2 adventure, the overall length of that adventure, I think, is 3 days total? Let's see here. Chemical Plant Zone, I don't know if you can even count it and its time of day, but it's presented as a night scene after the day scene of Emerald Hill. Then it's daytime again at Aquatic Mine. Aquatic Run. Nighttime again in Casinopolis Zone. Daytime in Hilltop. Can't say for Mystic Cave, but it is sunset upon getting to Oil Ocean. And then in Metropolis Zone, you can't say, but come Sky Chase, it's daytime again. So it's actually more along the course of a 4-day adventure, almost a whole work week. And so, while that's more than enough time to start to form a bond, if you go by the Japanese manual again, Tails is literally just chasing after Sonic. And so the friendship, while it's forged over the course of the adventure, it's still a tentative friendship. And there's still what the ideas of Tails being before his idol, and I want to capture that nervousness. As a lot of people criticize Amy for her idolization and adoration of Sonic, but they forget that Tails also has those traits. He just lacks the romantic interest in Sonic. And so those are parts of Tails' character I don't want lost, where he just becomes an exposition dumper. I want that youthfulness and unease around someone older than him who inspires him. But I also want that energy and excitability of a kid around their idol. And so Tails not being useful, I want to be something that makes him uncomfortable. And that's, I take a moment then to use that to highlight Sonic's kindness. Then you'll see him put his head on Tails' head and ruffle it roughly. And this is meant again to show Sonic's kindness and how important Tails is to him, and how forgiving he is when Tails can't keep up, when Tails can't be useful, when Tails can't accomplish. Sonic does not hold that against him. And so despite his irritability and his cheeky attitude, he is still kind and compassionate. And that's something I want to keep in balance when I write Sonic. And then from there, I talk about Sonic going for a run to clear his head. As much as people dislike Sonic 06, and I don't blame them for disliking it, it does do a very good job at presenting a lot of Sonic's philosophies on life as he's trying to help Elise. A lot of people focus on the romance. When I played through the game originally, to me, Elise's love of Sonic was one-sided. And a lot of Sonic's actions came across to me as just what he does for everybody. He has his truth as a character with a static arc does, and he teaches his truth to others. Which is what he was doing with Elise, who was a character who grew over the course of the game. And so it honestly had to be pointed out to me that Sonic is presented as being able to have feelings for Elise. And this is despite the fact that the game has a trial of love to where you can choose a lease. It wasn't really as subtle as my obstinate mind was obviously refusing to see. But that all aside, it still did a good job of teaching Sonic's ideas and his philosophies. And so you see him run. You see him run after he loses Chip. Instead of dwelling on it and being sad, he just runs. And so I present him as needing to take his own advice, while also going against his own advice, so he can be there as a pillar of support for Tails, especially since at this point of their relationship, and I've already established Sonic knows when he is, and so he's being delicate with Tails, and allowing Tails the room he needs to grow, because Sonic knows what he can flourish into. In the meantime, on Sonic's side, I play around a bit with Sonic's ability, his danger sense, and it being represented as a sneeze. But I also introduced the fact that he has allergies, which is a fact about Sonic's character. For a nature-loving hedgehog, having allergies is just generally funny. It's a bit of comic relief in his character, and part of the break to his seemingly perfect image. Yasuhara-san also has stated that Sonic is a clumsy character, and it's why he drops his rings all the time. And so I definitely don't want to leave out Sonic's clumsiness either. Though at this point of the story, I haven't needed to introduce his clumsiness, but it will come in time. And so as we move on, Sonic again brings his focus back around to the idea of dreaming. And the reason I bring the dream to the fore is Sonic does feel endangered. It's hard to explain what I'm thinking here, but the idea is literally that he's currently disconnected from reality, and something can go wrong at any moment. And so as I move forward, I take this next paragraph to again introduce that he's again dwelling on Amy, because Amy and her being broken is what has created this situation of him being aware of things being wrong. But as the scene is focusing on him and Tails, and setting up the rest of this episode, however many scenes or chapters it will be, well, I'll figure that out in time. Or roughly as I write it. Again, I make it up as I write, so while I have plans and ideas that I will try to pursue, there's no guarantee it will happen that way, and this scene is already a great example of that. As had it gone to my original plan, we would already be in Tails' lab, with Sonic taking the tornado out. But instead I've shifted things. They've also, aside from writing a story, I'm structuring it and basing the structure around the idea of being able to make a game design document. And that's why occasionally you'll see these notes on the side that go GDN. And so as I think about ideas that would work in the main structure of the game, I will put in those notes, and that will in time shift the story. And I won't do too much in action stages. I'll write a bit here and there, depending on the needs of the story. like the first action stage here, which is pretty much the 2D gameplay tutorial, is going to get skipped and left behind somewhere between this scene and the next scene. And it's one of those things that would only be seen should it be turned into a game. As that's not the case right now, and it's just me writing a story. It is at this point the thoughts of it being a game simply influencing how the story is structured. And hey, Mecha from the 80s, glad you could make it. Nearing the end of this stream, but having a bit of fun talking about things. About to get to talking about using Tails to segue again. And as I segue and talking about Tails able to accept Sonic being a little thrown off right now as being based to the Chaos Emeralds, I also take the time to dive into what I was talking about earlier, and the idea that Tails is only a tinkerer at this point in the franchise, as I'm set a week after the end of Sonic 2. And as a tinkerer, not an inventor, there are things about him which don't line up. And so I have Sonic specifically say lab, because Sonic's memory literally is going to stretch across the entire franchise, despite the fact that he's back at Sonic 2, because the needs of the story have put him back there. But where Sonic uses lab, Tails corrects him and calls it a little workshop. And this is implying the difference in where Tails starts to where he grows. And again, it's Sonic seeing the potential in him, because he has memories of having already seen it. And as Tails shifts over, I give Sonic a time to show his impatience and cut off an unnecessary reference from Tails about location. So I need a capitalized tornado here. But again, he's also still trying to stay encouraging. And now the story kind of gives Sonic his moment to run and set up the idea of giving the players a chance to play an action stage after way too many cutscenes. A lot of people would say that this would have way too many cutscenes at the beginning as a video game, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. Though, honestly, if I were to have to start the game with action instead of the story, I would probably choose Sonic battling Yoruku as a game opening boss battle, and then letting everything go wrong from there. But I feel like that would be revealing too much of the plot, ideas, and story of what's to come. So I'll just accept the flaw of being story heavy, as I love story. It's that, or if you have it built as a game, just give an arcade mode so people who just want to play the gameplay can jump right in and not worry about the story taking too long to get there. And now just a bit of banter between Sonic and Tails over the next couple of paragraphs here. Yeah. One again show that Tails is now focused back at his task. He's encouraged and he believes he can get it done, but he's worried about the time window. And one of the things that one's got to remember about Tails early on as a character is he had a distinct lack of confidence. And again, I don't want to lose that either. And so you'll just see me carrying that forward a lot here. And this is the wrong pronoun, since Sonic is referring to himself while addressing Tails. And of course I wanted to introduce the fact that he can spin his tails to fly as well. And then, as Tails leaves the scene, I give Sonic a moment to be introspective on what's going on. But he needs a moment to himself to talk it out and even see if he believes his own words. And it's also where I take the time to slot in that he is aware of the events of 06. The idea that it's implied he remembers them at the very last cutscene of the game is part of where the idea comes from for Sonic's great memory, and it's what's used in the prior chapters of my AU to even allow me to set the story in motion, is the idea of this perfect memory. Won't see Tails' adventure actively. I will actually work around it a bit later, but for my AU, it is implied to have taken place before the West Side Island adventure. And I'm not going to give away too much of why I'll be working around it. That's to come a bit in the future. And it's kind of a necessity for the involvement of other villains that I'll be using, which will be unique villains. I won't spoil too much about them or who they are, but a lot of the idea behind them is they're actually kind of inspired by the early plotline from Grand Blue Fantasy, which is I believe it's a browser RPG. It may be a mobile RPG, but I'll share it as a browser RPG. Very successful, been running for over 8 years, has 2 seasons of anime, which still hasn't even gotten halfway through the year 1 content of the game. It's got a fighting game, it's got a regular true action RPG coming up soon. And a lot of what's going on early in that is, to me, very inspirational and kind of a necessity for the way I want to tell my story and how I'll eventually bring Shadow, Silver, and a few other characters into the story, and things that I'll be doing with them. It is heavily inspired by Grand Blue Fantasy on that, but it's also to a degree slightly inspired from my pinch of knowledge on the Kingdom Hearts franchise. And so as I get back into the story here, and Sonic asking questions about what's going on, he's definitely confused by what's going on. And I take a moment with the ancient ring to show the idea of rings being absorbable into the body. I'll go into details on that more and some of the effects that rings can have on people in my AU. But for now, just introducing the idea that they are absorbed into the body when interacted with, unless one is consciously willing against it, such as Sonic is here. And so Sonic ends the scene, confident in the idea that it's just better to go with the flow and figure it out while he's running. And that's again what I was talking about with that philosophy of his, that it's better to run than to dwell. And then just a little wrap up at the end to both set what's to come and wrapping up the introduction from the beginning of the scene. And with that, the scene is over. So I can jump back to the start, run my editor, and it's just unhappy with one word today. If we track it down, it's just the one it's always unhappy with. So we will go ahead and ignore all of those. And once we get that 100%, that will wrap up today's scene. Normally I'd be pretty happy to soak up questions and answer them at this point of the stream. Have a little time compared to when I would normally stop a stream. But for today's stream, I plan on stopping it a little early because I have things to get done. But I will be back next Sunday morning, same time, 9 in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. Will be middle of the night if you live over here in the US like I do. And probably the afternoon if you're watching from over in Asia or even Australia. But for now, I'd just like to thank everybody who stopped by and watched. Sorry I didn't give you more time for questions today, but I do hope that you'll all look forward to next weekend. I'll try to get back onto social media to keep up a little better. I just have to be pretty busy. But until then, thank you very much for joining me. I will see everybody on Sunday or on social media. Again, I'm at Josh Tarwater over on Twitter. If you just take a quick look down at my icon here on Twitch, look for that PFP and you should be able to find me. And if not that, just look up Sonic Ring Bond Official, which should be, or just at Sonic_Ring_Bond, and you'll find the official Sonic Ring Bond Twitter account. For now though, thanks again everyone for joining me. I look forward to writing the next scene and hope everybody looks forward to seeing it. I'll see everyone next time. Until then, stay well.